A horseshoe is a product designed to protect a horse's hoof from wear. Horseshoes are available in a wide variety of materials and styles, developed for different types of horses and for the work they do. The most common materials are steel and aluminium. However, specialized shoes may include rubber, plastic, magnesium, titanium, or copper. Steel tends to be preferred in sports in which a strong, long-wearing shoe is needed, such as polo or show jumping, while aluminium shoes are lighter, making them more common in horse racing and dressage. Historians differ on the true origin of the horseshoe. However, many early iterations have been found. An early form of hoof protection was seen in ancient Asia, where horses' hooves were wrapped in rawhide, leather, or other materials. From archaeological finds in Great Britain, the Romans appeared to have attempted to protect their horses' feet with a strap-on, solid-bottomed hippo sandal that has a slight resemblance to the modern hoof boot. Because iron was a valuable commodity, any worn-out items were generally reforged and reused, so it is difficult to locate clear archaeological evidence. There is very little evidence of any nailed-on horseshoes prior to the 5th century, except for those found in the tomb of the Frankish king Childeric I in Belgium. By the 10th century, cast bronze horseshoes with nail holes had become common in Europe, and by the 13th century, shoes were forged in large quantities and could be bought ready-made. At this time, they also began to make their way to other parts of the world, including China. In 1835, the first US patent for a horseshoe manufacturing machine capable of making up to 60 horseshoes per hour was issued to Henry Burden. Since the domestication of the horse, likely around 3500 BC, the animals were found to be exposed to many conditions that created breakage or excessive hoof wear. In the wild, a horse may travel up to 80 kilometers per day to obtain adequate forage, though they do so at relatively low speeds, unless being chased by a predator. They also tend to live in arid steppe climates. The consequence of slow, non-stop travel in a dry climate is that horses' hooves are naturally worn to a small, smooth, even, and hard state. However, domestication greatly differs from what they would encounter in their natural environment. Domesticated horses were brought to colder and wetter areas than their ancestral habitat. These softer and heavier soils soften the hooves and make them prone to splitting, making hoof protection necessary. Consequently, it was in Northern Europe that the nailed horseshoe arose in its modern form. Domestic horses do not always require shoes. When possible, a barefoot hoof, at least for part of every year, is a healthy option for most horses. However, horseshoes have their place and can help prevent excess or abnormal hoof wear and injury to the foot from the physical stresses of work. The fitting of horseshoes is done by a specialist called a farrier, who prepares the feet, assesses potential lameness issues, and fits the appropriate shoes. In some countries, such as the UK, horseshoeing is legally restricted to people with specific qualifications and experience. In other countries, such as the US, professional licensing is not legally required, though professional organizations provide certification programs that publicly identify qualified individuals. When performed correctly, shoeing causes no pain to the animal. Before placing a new shoe, the farrier removes the old shoe using pincers and trims the hoof wall to the desired length with nippers, a sharp, pliers-like tool, and the sole and frog of the hoof with a hoof knife. Shoes do not allow the hooves to wear down as they naturally would in the wild, so over time they may become too long, and so they must be trimmed. If the excess is not trimmed, the bones will become misaligned, which would place stress on the legs of the animal. For a healthy hoof, the coffin bone inside the hoof should line up straight with the bones in the pastern. Farriers trim the insensitive part of the hoof, which is the same area into which they drive the nails. This is essentially the same as a manicure on a human fingernail, only on a much larger scale. Shoes are then measured to the foot and bent to the correct shape using a hammer, anvil, and a forge, and any other required modifications are added. Farriers may either cold shoe, in which they bend the metal shoe without heating it, or hot shoe, in which they place the metal in a forge before bending it. Hot shoeing can be more time-consuming and requires the farrier to have access to a forge. However, it usually provides a better fit, as the mark made on the hoof from the hot shoe can show how even it lies. The farrier must take care not to hold the hot shoe against the hoof too long, as the heat can damage it. The farrier then nails the shoes on by driving them into the hoof wall. The nails are shaped in such a way that they bend outwards as they are driven in, avoiding the sensitive inner part of the foot and emerging on the sides of the hoof. The farrier cuts off the sharp points using a clincher, or bends the nails almost flush to the hoof wall using a clincher block and hammer. This prevents the nail from getting caught on anything, and also helps to hold the nail and shoe in place. The farrier then uses a rasp to smooth any sharp edges. Horseshoes have long been considered lucky. They were originally made of iron, a material that was believed to ward off evil spirits, and traditionally were held in place with 7 nails, 7 being the luckiest number. The superstition acquired a further Christian twist due to the legend surrounding the 10th century saint Dunstan, who worked as a blacksmith before becoming Archbishop of Canterbury. The legend recounts that, one day, the devil walked into Dunstan's shop and asked him to shoe his horse. Dunstan pretended not to recognize him and agreed to the request. But rather than nailing the shoe to the horse's hoof, he nailed it to the devil's own foot, causing him great pain. Dunstan eventually agreed to remove the shoe, but only after extracting a promise that the devil would never enter a household with a horseshoe nailed to the door. Opinion is divided as to which way up the horseshoe ought to be nailed. Some say the ends should point up so that the horseshoe catches the luck, and others say they should point down so that the luck is poured upon those entering the home. The sport of horseshoes involves a horseshoe being thrown as close as possible to a rod in order to score points. The sport is thought to be as old as horseshoes themselves. While traditional horseshoes can still be used, most organised versions of the game use specialised sport horseshoes, which do not fit on horses' hooves.